Alright, well, I'm John, and this is Vanessa. We're going to be doing gun control today. Alright, and I will be doing it, we have two different aspects. I'm going to be doing it from pro-gun control, and she's going to be doing it for against gun control. Start off with how many deaths are the result of guns in the United States? In 2007 alone, there were 31,224 Americans who lost their lives to guns in homicides, suicides, and accidental shootings. Gun control has been an issue of contention as far back as 1934, when Congress enacted the National Firearms Act. Several factors must be taken into account regarding this viewpoint. The first is the constitutionality of gun control. The second is the cost of firearms for the country. And the third is the question of whether or not the current gun laws are working. The first issue being the constitutionality of gun controls. The Second Amendment states that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In 1939, the case of the United States versus Miller, the court ruled thus: in the absence of any evidence tending to show that possession or use of a shotgun having a barrel of less than 18 inches in length at this time has some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia, we cannot at this time guarantee, we cannot say at this time that the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear such an instrument. This decision set a precedent in the minds of the judges. According to John Paul Stevens, an associate judge for the Supreme Court, from 1970 to 1975, the Second Amendment should not be interpreted as limiting the authority of Congress to regulate the use or possession of firearms for purely civilian purposes. In the 1833 case of Barron versus the mayor of Baltimore, the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment restricted the federal government but not the states concerning lawmaking for guns. The preamble of the Second Amendment has several points that are similar to many laws created at the time of the Declaration of Independence in the individual states. These include things like explaining that a militia is necessary to the security of a free state and that the militia must be well regulated. These articles show that the importance placed on a belief in the militia and a fear of a standing army that the founders seem to share. This also draws attention to the fact that the Second Amendment seemed to be written with states in mind and not the individual. The second issue is the cost of firearms on the country. Here I've got a homicide rate for a bunch of different countries, affluent countries. And we've got the U.S. at the top there, with Italy in second, Taiwan, and Canada below it. Go ahead and press the space bar over there. The average death rate from firearms is 28,000 a year in the United States. In the Iraq War, 4,400 soldiers were killed in the first 7 years of the war. That is a little over 6 times in 1 year what it took 7 to do in a war zone. This is the highest rate of guns. This is the highest death rate by guns within the world's 36 richest nations. Between 1990 and 2005, guns were used to kill in more than 2/3 of spouse and ex-spouse homicides. The average death rate in children under 15 due to firearms is nearly 2/3, or is nearly 12 times higher than the rate is in 25 other industrialized nations. There's also a financial cost to this. Firearm-related deaths and injuries result in a $2.3 billion cost each year. Half of this cost must be borne by taxpayers. Go ahead and switch to the next one. If you then added the additional cost of legal and societal fees, the amount would escalate to around $100 billion. The last issue I'd like to discuss is, do the current gun controls actually work? There are currently laws in place to do background checks on anyone purchasing a firearm. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms reviewed 1,500 of its investigations and concluded that gun shows are a major trafficking channel, leading to around 26,000 guns transferring from legal commerce to illegal actions. Over 40% of gun sales occurs in a secondary market like this and have no background checks associated with them. When you have guns at home, you typically keep them for self-defense. These are 22 times more likely to be used in an unintentional shooting, assault, or in a murder case. In 2009, There were 13,636 homicides in the United States, and only 215 of these were ruled as justifiable homicides. To summarize, the Second Amendment could be interpreted to apply mainly to the state's militia and not to the individual. In the case of the United States versus Miller, the Supreme Court set a precedent that a piece of legislation could be passed to regulate firearms among individuals. The cost of firearms can hit both human lives and the pocketbook. There are also several instances of the current gun laws being avoided in perfectly legal means. Thank you for listening to my brief coverage of gun control from the pro-gun viewpoint. I will end now with a quote from the famous Hollywood cowboy Clint Eastwood. "I have a very strict gun control policy. If there's a gun around, I want to be